Today I'm gonna be talking about my country. I am from Ukraine. I was born there and grew up and like my country and the city I grew up in Kiev. But our country has an interesting story behind all these years. I called it Ukraine Not Easy Times. And if you look to the history of our country, it seems like we never had an easy times. Until these days. And we had Holocaust, hunger. In Russian language, it's very close words, so I always mix up them. We had hungers, we had genocides, we had wars, and it seems like throughout the years, somebody always wanted to destroy our nation. And it brought to some obvious results. First of all, it made our nation stronger. It seems like we can survive no matter what. It seems like nothing can destroy us because we can always find a way how to move on, how to find light in the darkness. The second is we became more patient. But it's interesting that we didn't become patient to one another. We became patient to the circumstances we live in, and we became patient to the life we have. We are not ready to fight for something because basically we don't trust something is going to change until these days. We don't trust if we'll have a new government that something will be changed. And you know why we don't trust? Because it will never really be changed. So this kind of life brought us to be patient to the circumstances we are. And the last thing is that it seems like the whole nation is used to become a victim. And it's in all ways of our lives. And this also maybe became worse even with this sign that you have here. You all know what it is. But this sign was also a little bit good that made to our country is that it united us to many other countries that was in the Soviet Union. And this Soviet Union, it kept our country for 70 years in communism. And 70 years, it's a long time of being without God, of being in a very strict regime, the regime that showed never compassion, that gave no freedom. As a result, we had a lot of poverty in our country. And the most interesting is until this day, we have such a poverty in the middle of Europe. And at the same time, the richest people in the world, they are also in Ukraine. So this gap in between very rich people and very poor people, this is our country. Helplessness, a huge number of alcoholism. Of course, it's connected to poverty and helplessness. And the most scary part about this is all this caused not just trauma, but a big, long generational trauma. It's domestic abuse. It's every other family in our country is facing domestic abuse. Addictions, children's trauma. And the most scary about this is that in our society, we think that this is our personal. We would never go and talk about this, share with someone, and children that grow up in our family, grow up with understanding that this is normal. I'm fine. Nothing strange is happening to me. I grow up in a family and I move to the adult world and think that there is, if something is connected to trauma, it's not about me. There is nothing bad happened to me because everything that is in the family, it's all personal business of each family. The other thing that Soviet Union made to us as a Christians is Soviet Union put us into a really big conservatism. we became a very, very closed up people. As nation, first of all, we don't trust anybody. And secondly, as a Christians, we also don't trust anybody. And that's why when we started facing trauma, we basically don't know what to do with this. We don't know how to be a respond. And even when we think about respond, we know the only respond is God, which is true. We all know God is our answer. But sometimes we don't know how to bring people to the really healing salvation, not just to bring them to God, but how to help them to go through this pain and their journey of grieving. So that's why trauma healing became a really good answer for our country. We finally started trauma healing in 2016, and we have led already 8 sessions where we covered around 300 ministers from all denominations. By the way, it's 18 denominations that Bible Society could unite, which is impossible actually. None other organizations in our country can unite in themselves all of the denomination, not a single one except Bible Society. So all the 18 denominations, official, of course, denominations that we have in our country, they all participate in trauma healing trainings and leading healing groups. And it's all pastor, priests, deacons, child's ministry. You see Catholic priest, very exciting, happy man. And God has blessed our country with this program because we see this as an answer to us. But war. You all know that recently Ukraine is being under the war, and I have heard from somebody that it's been called a civil war. So I can say it's not a civil war. And for us Ukrainians, this is very important, guys. Don't call it a civil war because we're not facing a civil war. We are not fighting with each other. Unfortunately, we are fighting against someone, and you never expect war. The problem is that war comes always unexpected, and it always brings a lot of results. It always brings a lot of pain. It always brings a lot of trauma. And the most horrible about this, that the war brings results for years, years, and years. And even if the war will be finished, we know that we'll be working with trauma for years. And at this point, war in Ukraine is already for almost 5 years. And sometimes people that are on the other parts of Ukraine where war is not happening, sometimes they get sick of this and tired of this and don't want to talk about this. But when you go there, you understand that it's so realistic. And people there, this is the place where I could look at people's eyes and see such helplessness, hopelessness, 100% hopelessness, and 100% hope. Hoping. No trust in God because God betrayed them and left them. And at the same time, 100% trust on God because there is nothing else they could be trusting in right there. So we started this program, trauma healing program, and we had already 2 sessions for chaplains that go there to the front lines to spend time there with soldiers that come that get to the hospitals, come back as a combat, and it's been successful. It's just a start, but we already have a lot of results. And here I have a story. I don't have his name and his picture because he didn't want it to be named. So that's an interesting story. This is a story of a young man named Sergey, and he is 23 at this time. By this time, he was in a war zone for 2 years already. The priest that was talking to him, the one who took trauma healing and then went back home to practice healing groups, he met this guy in the hospital. He lost his 2 legs, so he will never be able to walk, and his right hand will never be able to move. He has it, but it's never be able to move anymore. The time when he faced him at the hospital was not nice view of this guy. I mean, he looked horrible. And when priest started talking to him, this guy, Sergey, asked him one question. He said, "Please help me to find a way how I can forgive." And the priest looked at him, "Well, what do you need to forgive?" And he started talking to him. He wanted to ask as much of questions to help him to tell him his story, because obviously you look at him and you see there is a reasons to forgive. And this boy said, I cannot forgive my mom. And this boy who was in the war for 2 years, who is totally destroyed, who has totally destroyed body, he's asking a question, how can I forgive my mom, who left him when he was 14? And as this priest says, praise God, by that time I have accomplished trauma healing session. And I knew how to talk to him. And that story finished with the words of Sergey, "Thank you so much. Right now I can forgive my mother." And this is a good story of forgiveness, but it shows us so much that these people that are there in the war zone, sometimes we think that the only trauma that they have is from the horror of the war. Of course, this is it. This happens, and it never leaves their minds and hearts. What they see, the pain and blood and shooting in the war, it will never go away from their lives, and it will stay for all their lives. But sometimes the deeper pain can be much, much earlier. And that's why we understand that we have to work with these people even more closely than we regularly work with people. And at this time, I can say that we're just starting trauma healing in military area. We had some successes in trauma healing with adults, and we are starting with children this year. But military people is very special people. They have such a combination of their traumas and results, adding all the time, connected with addiction farther on. Almost every second person that had been in the war finishes up with alcoholism in our country. I don't know how it is in the States, but in our country. So alcoholism becomes a part of the military guys, actually. And we're just starting this ministry, but we already see this big need, because it's 1,000 people who live, civil people just who live there in a war zone or in the occupied territories. They face a lot of issues with destroyed homes, with destroyed lives, with destroyed relationships, families. We have a lot of people, soldiers that live there or in the other parts of Ukraine, their families. If someone is losing someone in the family, I personally work with non-believers, young people who lost someone in their families, and this field is huge. Volunteers that always go there and just spend time there in the gray zones, in the war zones, it's missionaries, it's medical workers, it's chaplains. The field is just huge. And I know that to do trauma healing in this sphere is difficult, is risky. It's almost like on the war, with the same attacks, with the same fields of mines, and to build trauma healing for military right now, as I feel, is like to walk on this field, which every step you make can be dangerous. So that's why we ask you very much to pray for us as we do this journey. We just know that the need is growing every day in all these spheres. And what I'm able to share with you is just this little bit, because I didn't have more time allowed it. But at least even with this time, I just would like you guys to ask you to pray and support us with the prayer, because we understand that we are in this filled with minds. May God bless you.